Rabbi Jonathan Wittenberg, it's so wonderful to learn with you. Today we are in Parshat Toledot, and it's EcoShabbat in the UK. We are asking one big question of this week's Parsha. How does the Parsha teach us of the importance of being in tune with nature? Rabbi Jonathan, welcome.
So it's great to learn with you, Rabbi Oliver. Thank you for having me. We tend to focus on the beginning and the end of Toldot, the conflict of the twins in the womb, the birthright, and then Isaac being dim with seeing and the blessing stolen at the end. But actually in the middle is this essential passage about wells, about the most basic resource in the world, about water. By the way, it also includes a reference to sowing and planting and grain. And perhaps also that and conflict are implied as in constant relationship. We struggle to have sufficient resources on this earth, and that is key to the question of climate justice at COP, as well as the question of biodiversity. But to come back to the wells, which form the central portion of this week's Sidra, over every well there is a conflict until finally there's a well dug called Rechovot, broad spaces, and I think we're trying to find the broad spaces in the world in which there'll be enough resources for everybody. But this focus on wells is not unique to this week's portion. Last week, that's where Rebecca met Abraham's servant. Next week, or the week after, it's where Jacob will meet Rachel. It's where Moses encounters Tzipporah and meets his wife. So wells and this basic connection with nature are an essential part of the Hebrew Bible. And this is the authors of the Hebrew Bible from beginning all the way to end, and actually of the Mishnah and the Talmud as well. They lived in close interconnection with nature. They understood its rhythms, its droughts, its floods, and they had an awareness which I think we have lost to our detriment.
So one might describe the wells as the modern day cafe, that people would chew over the realities and the stories of the world in relationship with these humanly dug wells, but nevertheless water sources which were very much directly in relationship with nature. And the story that you're describing is a story of, in some way or other, going into a world where we do some of that reconnection. Rabbi Jonathan, you're the senior rabbi of our Masorti movement and of New York London Synagogue, and in the next in this week you will be in Glasgow for COP26. We're recording a tiny bit before this. Tell us a little bit about COP and a little bit about your journey with EcoSynagogues and some of the message that both intertwines with this week's parsha and that you think is so crucial, that we think is so crucial for this EcoShabbat.
I just want to go back first to your comment, your metaphor of the cafe, because it's true and it's not true. It is where people meet and where they mull over and where they talk. But if I think of coffee, and there'll be an awful lot of coffee at COP, I'm sure, I want to go stages back. Where does the coffee come from? What does the growth of coffee take from the land? And that takes us back to water and to soil. And one of the dangers of that image of it being the cafe is that and it's classic about how we are in the and in the northern wealthier world, we actually forget what resources the things we take for granted draw from the world. And one of the key features at COP will be remembering that, including the third world and poorer countries and those most threatened, already affected by climate change. So I am hoping from COP that there will be very serious commitments across the world, not just in word but meant in deed and followed up and with legal teeth and international pressure, to zero emissions commitments, to financing those countries that are most affected to adapt to climate change, to prevent hunger, further flooding and further disaster, and that there will be serious steps towards the restoration of biodiversity across the world, including in this country, which is close to the bottom of the list of all nations in terms of its sort of natural and wildlife status. EcoSynagogue will be there in the green zone with its stand. We already have 40-something synagogues signed up. We'll be working closely with EcoChurch and other faiths. We have a strong voice in being able to reach communities and take our communities on a journey to greater awareness and also to the change of habits. being more careful in how we consume, being less heedless in how we waste, but also being contributors into what we plant, what we grow, the organizations we can belong with that promote biodiversity and climate justice, and lobbying as well for local and international change. So all of these are kind of part of the huge agenda for COP.
And just to take it back home for a moment, I also believe that you, both in your community and in the life that you've lived as a rabbi, have been in some way or another a model for this, that an aspect of the journey that we need to go on is also, as individuals, have a more intimate relationship with the natural world. And as somebody who has green fingers and has often spent many hours, as I understand, Rabbi Jonathan, in your garden, an aspect of this is a personal spiritual journey back to the land and back to relationship with nature, which is partly what you describe in terms of this importance difference between the well and the cafe, that the well is actually in relationship with nature, and some guys or another, our communities and us individuals need to find that relationship in order to go on that journey as a community and as a society.
You're really right. I mean, it's great to talk to a fellow spirit, because I know that, you know, your hands are as deep in manure as mine sometimes are, and your products are fantastic. I think there are do's and don'ts here. We need that journey back to reconnection, and actually, in some respects, lockdown has helped, because people have understood the physical and mental well-being that comes from connection with nature. But it also inspires humility and wonder and awe and a sense of beauty, which I would call spiritual values. So it restores the soul, as the psalm says. And the great do's are to belong to organizations that lobby and promote nature and help us understand it, to be planters, to make our gardens, if we have them, or even balconies, into biodiverse mini zones. But there are also don'ts. We need to modify our habits of consumption. We need to think about the impact of what we buy on the places we buy it from, and on the emissions. As synagogues, I want to see us move towards setting some sort of net zero aim for our own buildings and for simchas, that when people travel, there should be some sense of what can I do to restore that, what I'm doing to the land. So there's some very big pluses, and there are also some modifications and changes which we need to make, which takes me a bit back to the well, because the Zohar has this wonderful image of the well as the depths of the well on high. And that well is where the living waters flow from God down to this earth. And it's understood as the place of teshuvah, the place where we can go to wash our hearts and minds and consciences and souls to begin again. And so I think beyond the wells of actual water, we need to connect with this well of living water and commit to a form of teshuvah which may be new to our generation, which is environmental teshuvah, how we treat the world, how we stand at the edge of that well.
So we're it's a beautiful image to close on. We're almost out of time, and I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing, and we wish you only good on your journey to Glasgow and to COP. And we are appreciative of the representation that EcoSynagogues with your leadership is giving for the Jewish community, and hopefully for a good outcome to these negotiations and talks in the next weeks. The final word was with you, Rabbi Jonathan, and wishing you a Shabbat Shalom and a Nesiat Tova, a good journey.
Thank you, Rabbi Oliver, and I shall be reporting live from COP and writing about it as much as I can. Just to say that just as you've created this opportunity for us to talk about the Parsha and its real groundedness deep in the ground in the search for water, so it said the most important thing we can contribute to the climate emergency is to talk about it with people and be serious about it and make it clear that our commitments go deep. It's like a well has to go deep until the water will enter it.
Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. And